The morning sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Zariah Lane's small apartment in the Bronx. She squinted at the alarm clock. 5:30 a.m. With a deep sigh, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and stretched. Today was the day. The interview that could change everything. Zariah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, examining her reflection. At 28, her face still held the softness of youth, but her eyes told a different story. They had seen too much, lost too much. She ran her fingers over the small scar on her right wrist, a childhood memory from when she fell out of a treehouse. Whose treehouse? The memory was fuzzy, like so many others she had pushed away. You can do this, she told herself, applying a modest amount of makeup. It's just another job interview. But it wasn't just another interview. This was for a concierge position at Glass Towers, the most exclusive residential building in Manhattan. The salary they offered was enough to finally make a dent in her father's medical bills and maybe even save a little for herself. Zariah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her landlord. Rent's late again. Need it by Friday or we'll have to talk about other arrangements. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Another reason why this job had to work out. Her part-time work at the local community center wasn't cutting it anymore. Zariah carefully selected her outfit, a simple black skirt suit she had bought second-hand, but tailored herself to fit perfectly. As she dressed, her eyes fell on the photo of her father on the dresser. It had been taken 2 years ago, before the cancer diagnosis that had turned their lives upside down. "I'm trying, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm really trying." The phone rang, and Zariah's heart jumped when she saw her brother's name on the screen. Marcus rarely called these days. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Z, it's me," Marcus said, his voice tense. "Have you heard anything?" "About what?" "The neighborhood. There's some developer buying up properties left and right. Mom and Dad's old place might be next." Zariah sat down on the edge of her bed. The small house where they grew up was the only thing they had left of their parents. After her father died, Marcus had moved in, promising to keep up with the taxes. It was the one thing they hadn't sold to pay the medical bills. "Who's buying?" she asked. "Nobody knows. Some company hiding behind another company. Look, I know we haven't been talking much, but this is serious. If I lose this house—" "You won't," Zariah said firmly, though she had no idea how she could help. "Let me get through today and we'll figure something out." After hanging up, Zariah gathered her things and headed out. The subway ride from the Bronx to Manhattan gave her time to think, to prepare. By the time she emerged onto the gleaming streets of the Upper East Side, she had pushed her personal worries deep down and put on the professional mask she had perfected over years of customer service jobs. Glass Towers lived up to its name. The 70-story building seemed to be made entirely of glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a giant mirror reaching into the sky. Zariah took a steadying breath and walked through the revolving doors into the lobby. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior: marble floors, modern art on the walls, and a massive chandelier that looked like it was made of thousands of crystal teardrops. Behind a sleek desk sat a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair. "I'm here for an interview with Ms. Reynolds," Zariah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Zariah Lane," the receptionist smiled. "Of course. Ms. Reynolds is expecting you. Please, take a seat and she'll be with you shortly." Zariah had barely settled into one of the plush leather chairs when a tall woman in a crisp navy suit approached. "Ms. Lane, I'm Patricia Reynolds, head of resident services." She extended a manicured hand. "Thank you for coming in today." The interview started as most did. Questions about experience, why she wanted the job, what she knew about Glass Towers. Zariah answered each question with practiced poise, drawing on her background in hospitality and customer service. "The position of concierge here is not like any other," Ms. Reynolds explained. "Our residents expect perfection, discretion, the ability to make the impossible happen without drawing attention to the effort behind it." "I understand," Zariah nodded. "I've always prided myself on my ability to anticipate needs before they're expressed." Ms. Reynolds looked impressed. "There's one more thing. The owner of Glass Towers is particular. He values his privacy above all else. Most of our staff have never even met him." The owner lives here? Zariah asked, surprised. Yes, in the penthouse. Mr. Cade rarely interacts with the staff directly, but when he does, his requests must be handled with the utmost priority and discretion. Zariah nodded, mentally noting the name. Cade. It sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Well, Ms. Lane, Reynolds said, closing her folder, your references are impeccable, and I believe you would be a good fit for our team. The job is yours if you want it. Zariah blinked in surprise. Really? I mean, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. You can start Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. I'll email you the employee handbook and dress code guidelines. Ms. Reynolds stood up. Welcome to Glass Towers. As Zariah walked out of the building, she could hardly believe her luck. The salary was even better than advertised, with benefits. That included health insurance. For the first time in months, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't notice the sleek black car pulling up to the curb until she nearly walked into it. The driver door opened, and a tall man in a suit stepped out to open the rear passenger door. Excuse me, Zariah said, stepping back. That's when she saw him. A man in his early 30s with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her rent for a year. He was looking down at his phone as he emerged from the car, his expression serious. For a moment, something about him seemed familiar, the way he moved, perhaps, or the angle of his jaw. But then he looked up, his eyes meeting hers briefly, and the moment passed. His gaze was cold, distant. You're blocking my way, he said, his voice deep and clipped. Oh, I'm sorry. Zariah moved aside quickly, embarrassed. The man didn't acknowledge her apology, simply walked past her into the building without another glance. Don't take it personally, the driver said with a kind smile. Mr. Cade has a lot on his mind these days. Zariah's eyes widened. That was Emory Cade, the reclusive owner of Glass Towers? She watched through the glass doors as he crossed the lobby, staff members nodding respectfully as he passed. What had Miss Reynolds said? He values his privacy above all else. Well, Zariah could certainly understand that. She had her own secrets to keep. Emory Cade stood in his penthouse office, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. From 70 stories up, the city looked like a model, the people like ants, all the chaos and noise reduced to a peaceful, distant panorama. Just how he liked it. Distance? Control? The board is waiting for you to join the call, Mr. Cade, his assistant David said from the doorway. Emory nodded without turning around. 2 minutes. When he was alone again, he closed his eyes for a moment. He'd been up since 4 a.m., reviewing reports on his latest acquisition in the Bronx. The Willowbrook neighborhood was the final piece of his plan, a development that would transform a forgotten corner of the city into a modern, mixed-use community. Some would call it gentrification. Emory preferred to think of it as progress, evolution. The neighborhood had been dying for years anyway. He tried not to think about why he'd chosen that particular area. It was just business. Good business. The location was perfect, the timing right, the potential return on investment substantial. It had nothing to do with the memories that still haunted him, the ghosts he'd spent a lifetime trying to outrun. Emory turned away from the window and sat down at his desk. His laptop displayed the faces of his executive team, waiting for him to lead the meeting. Let's make this quick, he said. Where are we with the Willowbrook acquisitions? His project manager cleared his throat. We've secured about 70% of the properties. Some holdouts on Maple Street, but we're increasing our offers. I don't want to waste time negotiating, Emory said. Offer 20% above market for the remaining properties. If they still won't sell, look into other options. Other options, sir? Tax liens, code violations, there's always leverage to be found. Emory's tone made it clear the discussion was over. What else? The meeting continued, but Emory found his mind wandering. Earlier, outside the building, he'd encountered a woman who seemed oddly familiar. Something about her eyes, perhaps. The feeling had been so strong that for a moment he'd felt a strange pull like a half-remembered dream. But that was ridiculous. Emory Cade didn't believe in such nonsense. Sentiment was weakness, and he had eliminated weakness from his life long ago. After the meeting, Emory reached for the prescription bottle on his desk. The migraines had been getting worse lately. His doctor blamed stress and suggested meditation, of all things, as if sitting cross-legged and humming would solve anything. "Mr. Cade," his assistant's voice came through the intercom, "Ms. Reynolds would like to confirm your attendance at the residence reception next week." Emory frowned. He'd forgotten about that. Every quarter, Glass Towers hosted a reception for the residents, a networking event disguised as a social gathering. As the owner, he was expected to make an appearance, though he usually managed to slip away after the minimum required time. "Tell her I'll be there," he said reluctantly. Later that evening, as Emory prepared for bed, he found himself standing in front of the small wooden box he kept locked in his bedside drawer. He rarely opened it. The contents were too painful, too raw even after all these years. But tonight something compelled him to take out the key. Inside the box lay a collection of childhood treasures. A smooth stone with a natural hole through the middle, a faded friendship bracelet made of red and blue threads, and a stack of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a ribbon. Letters he'd written but never sent, once he realized the recipient had no interest in hearing from him. His fingers brushed against the top letter, and he quickly closed the box. Some wounds never healed, no matter how much time passed or how many glass towers you built to hide in. Zariah's first week at Glass Towers flew by in a blur of training sessions, introductions, and learning the complex systems that kept the luxury building running smoothly. By Friday, she felt like her head might explode from all the information she had to absorb. "You're doing great," said Michael, the senior concierge who was training her. "Most people take weeks to get this comfortable with the systems." Zariah smiled gratefully. "I've always been a quick learner." "You'll need to be. The residents here can be demanding." Michael lowered his voice. "Especially the man upstairs." "Mr. Cade?" Zariah asked, remembering their brief encounter. Michael nodded. "He doesn't interact with staff much, but when he does, it's usually because something's gone wrong. And trust me, you don't want to be on the receiving end of his disappointment." "Has anyone been fired for disappointing him?" Zariah asked, concerned. "Not directly. But people who can't meet his standards tend to move on." Michael checked his watch. "Speaking of which, he ordered dinner from Le Bernardin. It should be arriving any minute. Want to handle the delivery? Consider it your initiation." Zariah's stomach tightened with anxiety, but she nodded. "Sure." When the delivery arrived, Zariah carefully checked the order against the ticket, ensuring everything was correct before taking it up to the penthouse. The private elevator required a special key, which Michael provided. "Remember, be professional. Be brief, and for God's sake, don't ask personal questions," he advised as the elevator doors closed. The ride to the top floor seemed to take forever. Zariah used the time to calm her nerves. It was just a food delivery. She'd handled much more complicated tasks in her previous jobs. The elevator opened directly into a marble foyer. Zariah stepped out, balancing the bag of food carefully. "Hello," she called softly. "Delivery from Le Bernardin." No response. She took a few more steps into the penthouse, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The space was magnificent, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360-degree view of the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary, and art pieces that belonged in a museum. "Hello," she called again, a bit louder this time. "Just leave it on the table." The voice came from somewhere deeper in the penthouse. Zariah followed it to find a spacious living area with more stunning views. Emory Cade stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. "I don't care what they're asking. Get it done," he was saying, his tone leaving no room for argument. Zariah quietly placed the food on the dining table and turned to leave. "Wait," Cade said, ending his call. "You're new." Zariah turned back. "Yes, sir." "Zariah Lane. I started on Monday." He looked at her more carefully now, and Zariah had the strange sensation that he was trying to place her, just as she had tried to place him when they first met outside the building. "We bumped into each other outside," she offered. "My first day." "Right," he nodded, his expression unreadable. "The job is working out for you?" "Yes, thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity." Emory moved to the table and opened the bag, inspecting the contents. "Do you live in the city, Ms. Lane?" The question surprised her. Hadn't Michael said he never asked personal questions? "Yes, in the Bronx, Willowbrook area." Something flickered in Emory's eyes. Recognition? Surprise? But it was. Gone so quickly, Zariah thought she might have imagined it. Willowbrook, he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. Interesting coincidence. Coincidence? Zariah asked, forgetting Michael's warning about personal questions. Emory seemed to catch himself. Nothing. Thank you for bringing this up. His tone made it clear the conversation was over. Zariah nodded and turned to leave, but as she reached the foyer, a small object on a side table caught her eye. It was a paperweight, but not just any paperweight. It was a smooth stone with a natural hole through the middle, exactly like one she had cherished as a child, until it disappeared during one of their many moves. Is something wrong? Emory asked, having followed her to the foyer. No, I just... Zariah hesitated. That stone? It's unusual. Emory glanced at the paperweight. A childhood memento, nothing special. But the way he quickly moved it out of sight told Zariah it was more than that. Back in the staff area, Michael was waiting. How did it go? Fine, I think, Zariah said, still distracted by the stone. He asked where I live. Michael raised his eyebrows. Really? That's unusual. Is it? Zariah shrugged. Maybe he was just making conversation. Emory Cade doesn't make conversation, Michael said. Everything he does has a purpose. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but Zariah couldn't shake. The feeling that something significant had happened in that penthouse. The stone, Emory's reaction to her neighborhood, it all felt connected somehow, though she couldn't understand why. That night, as she rode the subway back to the Bronx, Zariah found herself thinking about her childhood in Willowbrook. Most of her memories from before her teens were fragmented, hazy. Her therapist had called it a defense mechanism, the mind protecting itself from pain by burying certain memories. After her mother left when Zariah was just 8, she had shut down emotionally, throwing herself into caring for her father and younger brother. And when her best friend moved away without even saying goodbye, it had been the final straw. Little Zariah had decided that caring too much only led to hurt, so she had locked away the memories of those she had lost. But now something was stirring in those locked places. A stone with a hole in it. A boy with blue eyes who had promised to marry her in a blanket fort behind his house. Zariah shook her head, dismissing the thought. She was being ridiculous. Emory Cade was just her employer, a wealthy man who happened to own a stone similar to one from her childhood. Nothing more. At her stop, Zariah exited the subway and walked the familiar blocks to her apartment building. As she turned onto her street, she noticed a black car parked across from her building, the same kind of car that had dropped off Emory at Glass Towers. Her heart raced as she hurried past, keeping her head down. It couldn't be him. Why would Emory Cade be in the Bronx outside her apartment building? But as she glanced back, the car pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. Coincidence, she told herself. Just a coincidence. The following week, Zariah settled into her role at Glass Towers. She quickly earned a reputation for efficiency and discretion, handling the residents' requests with a warmth that set her apart from some of the more formal staff members. Mrs. Abernathy in 4502 has requested you specifically for her dinner reservations, Michael told her on Wednesday. That's a good sign. She's one of our most influential residents. Zariah smiled, pleased with the recognition. I'll take care of it right away. As she made the calls to secure a last-minute reservation at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, Zariah noticed Emory Cade crossing the lobby. He was deep in conversation with a woman in a tailored suit, their heads bent over a tablet. For a moment, Zariah felt a strange pang of, what? Not jealousy, surely. She barely knew the man, but something about the scene bothered her in a way she couldn't articulate. Emory looked up then, as if sensing her gaze. Their eyes met across the lobby, and for a split second something passed between them, a flash of recognition that went beyond their brief interactions. Then he was turning away, continuing his conversation as if nothing had happened. Earth. To Zariah, Michael said, waving a hand in front of her face. You okay? Sorry, Zariah blinked. Just got distracted for a second. Later that afternoon, Ms. Reynolds called Zariah to her office. I've been receiving excellent feedback about your performance, she said. which is why I'd like you to take on additional responsibilities." "Of course," Zariah nodded eagerly. "Whatever you need. The residence reception is this Friday evening. I'd like you to be part of the team coordinating it." Ms. Reynolds handed her a folder. "All the details are in here. It's a quarterly event, very important for resident relations." Zariah opened the folder, scanning the contents. "Will Mr. Cade be attending?" Ms. Reynolds looked surprised by the question. "Yes, though he typically makes only a brief appearance." "Why do you ask?" "Just trying to understand the full scope of the event," Zariah said quickly. "Is there anything specific I should know about his preferences?" "Mr. Cade prefers minimal interaction. Make sure his favorite whiskey is available, and that there's a clear exit route when he's ready to leave." Ms. Reynolds studied Zariah curiously. "Has he spoken to you?" "Just briefly," Zariah admitted. "When I delivered his dinner last week." "Interesting. He rarely engages with new staff." Ms. Reynolds made a note on her tablet. "Well, consider yourself lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Once Mr. Cade notices you, you're on his radar permanently." The idea should have made Zariah nervous, but instead, she felt a strange flutter of anticipation. What was wrong with her? This was just a job, an important one that she needed desperately. The last thing she should be doing was developing some sort of fascination with her enigmatic boss. That evening, Zariah received a text from her brother. They made an offer on Dad's house today. Double the market value. Who pays double for a rundown? House in Willowbrook? Zariah stared at the message, a chill running down her spine. Double the market value. Just like Emory had instructed his team during that phone call she'd overheard in his penthouse. Offer 20% above market for the remaining properties. It couldn't be a coincidence. Emory Cade was the developer buying up Willowbrook. Her childhood home was just another property to him, another piece in his corporate puzzle. But why had he seemed so interested when she mentioned where she lived? If he was behind the buyouts, wouldn't he have wanted to hide that fact? Unless he didn't know she had any connection to that particular house. He was buying the entire neighborhood, after all. Her family's home would just be one address among many. Zariah texted back, "Don't sell, not yet. Let me find out what's going on." Marcus replied immediately, "Easy for you to say. You're not the one trying to keep this place from falling apart. Some of us can't afford principles, Z." His words stung, but Zariah knew they came from a place of hurt. After their father's death, she and Marcus had drifted apart. He blamed her for not doing more to help with their father's care, while she resented him for not understanding the financial strain she'd been under. "I'll figure this out," she promised aloud, though her brother couldn't hear her. Somehow, Friday night arrived, and with it, the residence reception. Zariah had spent the day ensuring everything was perfect, from the champagne temperature to the placement of the flower arrangements. "You clean up nice," Michael commented, as Zariah adjusted her black cocktail dress. The staff were expected to blend in while remaining identifiable by subtle glass towers pins on their attire. "Thanks," Zariah smiled nervously. "Is it always this elaborate?" "Wait until you see the holiday party," Michael laughed. "This is nothing." The reception was held in the building's grand ballroom, a space that Zariah hadn't even known existed until the preparations began. By 7 p.m., the room was filled with the elite of New York society, business tycoons, celebrities, politicians, all mingling over champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Zariah moved through the crowd with practiced ease, refilling glasses, directing guests to the buffet, and solving minor crises before they could develop into major ones. "Mr. Cade has arrived," Michael murmured as he passed by. "Right on schedule." Zariah turned to see Emory entering the ballroom. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that made him look even more imposing than usual. Despite his obvious discomfort, in social settings he moved with confidence, nodding to residents as he made his way to the bar. Throughout the evening, Zariah found her gaze returning to him again and again. There was something about the way he held himself apart from the crowd, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. He was surrounded by people yet completely alone. It reminded her of herself. As the night progressed, Zariah noticed Emory, checking his watch repeatedly. Ms. Reynolds had mentioned he usually left early, and it seemed he was counting down the minutes until he could make his escape. When he finally headed toward the exit, Zariah happened to be nearby, assisting an elderly resident with her wrap. "Thank you, dear," the woman said, patting Zariah's hand. "You remind me of someone, a little girl who used to visit my garden. What was her name? She loved my cherry tree." Zariah smiled politely, though the woman's words sent a strange jolt through her. A cherry tree? There had been one in her childhood, in the yard of a neighbor. Mrs. Winters. Winters was the elderly resident's name too, but surely it was just a coincidence. "You're very kind, Mrs. Winters," Zariah said. "Zariah," the old woman exclaimed suddenly. That was her name. Such an unusual, beautiful name. Emory, who had been passing by, stopped abruptly. "What did you say?" Mrs. Winters turned to him, beaming. "Oh, Mr. Cade, I was just telling this lovely young woman that she reminds me of a child I knew years ago. Zariah was her name, just like our new concierge here." Emory's eyes fixed on Zariah's face, really seeing her for perhaps the first time. "Zariah," he repeated, the name sounding strange on his lips as if he was testing it. "From Willowbrook." Zariah nodded slowly, her heart pounding. "Yes, I grew up there." Something shifted in Emory's expression, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. For a moment he looked almost vulnerable. "On Maple Street," he said, not a question but a statement. Zariah's breath caught. "How did you know that?" But Emory was already moving away. His face shuttered once more. "Excuse me, I need to leave." Zariah watched him go, 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. How did he know where she grew up? Why had the mention of her name affected him so strongly? And why did she suddenly have the overwhelming feeling that she knew him, not as Emory Cade, the billionaire owner of glass towers, but as someone else entirely? As the reception wound down and the staff began cleaning up, Zariah found herself drawn to the window, looking up at the penthouse floors high above. Somewhere up there, Emory Cade was probably pacing, as unsettled by their interaction as she was. What was the connection between them? And why did it feel like the answer was just beyond her reach, hidden in the shadowy corners of memories she had locked away long ago? One thing was certain, Emory Cade was not just her employer. He was something more, something connected to her, past. And as the pieces slowly began to fall into place, Zariah realized that uncovering the truth might cost her not just her job, but her heart as well. The next morning, Zariah woke to a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the riverside. Cafe at 10 a.m. we need to talk." E.C. Zariah stared at the message, her mind racing. How had Emory gotten her personal number? And what could he possibly want to discuss that couldn't wait until Monday? Against her better judgment, she texted back a simple, "I'll be there." The Riverside Cafe was a small upscale establishment overlooking the Hudson River, far from both Glass Towers and Zariah's apartment in the Bronx. As she entered, she spotted Emory immediately, sitting at a corner table, his back to the wall, watching the door. He stood as she approached, a gesture of politeness that seemed at odds with his usual brusque manner. "Thank you for coming," he said, waiting for her to sit before resuming his seat. "How did you get my number?" Zariah asked. "I own the building. I have access to employee records." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I apologize for the intrusion." Zariah nodded, waiting for him to continue. Up close, in the natural light streaming through the windows, Emory looked different, younger, less guarded. There were shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. "Last night, he began, then stopped, seeming unsure how to proceed. "Mrs. Winters mentioned something that caught my attention. That my name is Zariah," she supplied, "and that I grew up on Maple Street in Willowbrook." Emory nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "When I was a child, I had a friend named Zariah. She lived on Maple Street in a blue house with white shutters." Zariah's heart skipped a beat. Her childhood home had been blue with white shutters, before her father painted it yellow after her mother left. "That was my house," she said softly. "But I don't remember." Emory reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He placed it on the table between them. It was the stone, the smooth, round stone with a hole through the middle. "Dow. You recognize this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zariah stared at the stone, and suddenly, like a dam breaking, memories began to flood back. A summer day by a creek. A boy with dark hair and bright blue eyes holding up the stone triumphantly. "It's a wishing stone," he said. "If you find a stone with a hole all the way through, it's magic. We can share it." "Emmy," she breathed, the childhood nickname slipping out before she could stop it. Emory's face transformed, a mix of shock and something like hope. "You do remember." Zariah reached for the stone, her fingers trembling. As she touched it, more memories surfaced, playing in a treehouse, sharing secrets under a blanket fort, promising to be best friends forever. "You were Emmett," she said, the pieces falling into place. "Emmett Carter. You lived 3 houses down, but you moved away. Your mom came in the middle of the night and took me away," Emory finished. "I changed my name when I turned 18, from Emmett Carter to Emory Cade." Zariah sat back, overwhelmed. The reclusive billionaire who owned glass towers, who was buying up her old neighborhood, was her childhood best friend, the boy who had once promised to marry her when they grew up. "But why didn't you write back?" Emory asked, a hint of the old hurt creeping into his voice. "I sent you letters. Every week for a year. I never got any letters." Zariah shook her head. "I thought you just forgot about me." They stared at each other across the table, 2 adults trying to reconcile the children they had been with the people they had become. "Why are you buying Willowbrook?" Zariah finally asked. "Is it because of our past there?" Emory's expression closed off slightly. "It's a business decision. The area has potential for development." "Development means demolition," Zariah said. "Those are people's homes. My brother still lives in our old house." "Your brother?" Emory looked surprised. "Marcus, he's still there?" The fact that he remembered her brother's name after all these years struck Zariah deeply. "Yes, and he's struggling to keep it." She hesitated, then added, "That house is all we have left of our father. He died 2 years ago." Emory's face softened. "I'm sorry to hear that. Your father was a good man." The conversation lulled, both of them lost in memories and the strange reality of their reconnection. Outside, the river flowed steadily past, indifferent to the currents of emotion swirling at their table. "What happens now?" Zariah finally asked. Emory looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing both the child she had been and the woman she had become. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think we both have questions that need answers." As they sat there, the stone between them, neither could have predicted how their rediscovered connection would soon be tested, or how the secrets of the past would threaten the fragile beginnings of their future together. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Zariah's small apartment as she sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by old photo albums and keepsakes she hadn't looked at in years. After her meeting with Emory at the cafe, she'd gone straight home and dug these boxes out of her closet, searching for tangible proof of their shared past. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened a worn album with faded blue covers. Inside, protected by plastic sheets, were photographs of her childhood. Birthdays, school events, family picnics. She flipped through the pages slowly until she found what she was looking for. A photo of 2 children, maybe 8 years old, sitting on the front steps of a blue house. The girl with braided hair and a gap-toothed smile was unmistakably Zariah, and the boy beside her, arms slung casually around her shoulders, his face lit up with laughter. That was Emmett. "Emory. It's really you," she whispered, tracing his face with her fingertip. The memories had been coming back in waves since their conversation at the cafe, playing hide-and-seek in the neighborhood, climbing the cherry tree in Mrs. Winter's yard, building a blanket fort in his basement, where they'd exchanged solemn vows to marry each other when they grew up. But there were still gaps, still questions. Why had his mother taken him away so suddenly? Why had he never received her letters? And she never received his? And perhaps most importantly, how had the boy who shared ice cream cones with her on hot summer days become the man who was now threatening to destroy the only home her family had left? Zariah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "They've upped the offer again, 2.5x market value now. This is crazy, Z, we need to talk." She stared at the message, conflicted. Part of her wanted to call Marcus immediately, and tell him everything, that she knew the developer, that he was their long-lost childhood friend, but another part held back. She still didn't understand Emory's motives, didn't know if their reconnection would change anything about his business plans. Before she could decide what to do, another text came through, this one from Emory. "Can we meet again? There's more we need to discuss." "Dinner at my place tonight?" Zariah hesitated. Going to his penthouse felt different now, more personal, more intimate. But she needed answers, and this might be her only chance to convince him to spare her family. "Home what time?" she texted back. 7. "Private elevator will be programmed for your access." Zariah glanced at the clock. It was already past 4. She closed the photo album and began to get ready, her mind racing with questions and memories and hopes she was afraid to name. The private elevator opened directly into Emory's penthouse, just as it had the day Zariah delivered his dinner. But this time, instead of the cool, impersonal space she remembered, the penthouse felt different. Soft music played in the background, and the harsh overhead lights had been replaced by the warm glow of table lamps. On the dining table, she could see place settings for 2. "You came." Emory's voice startled her. He stepped out from the kitchen area, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, in dark jeans and a grey sweater. Without the armor of his business suits, he looked younger, more approachable. More like the boy she remembered. "I had to," Zariah said simply. "There's too much we need to talk about." He nodded, gesturing toward the table. "I ordered from that Italian place on 53rd. I remembered you used to love spaghetti." The fact that he remembered such a small detail from their childhood caught Zariah off guard. "You remember that?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I remember everything, Zariah. That's part of the problem." They sat down to dinner, the conversation initially stilted and formal. But as they ate, the awkwardness began to dissolve. Emory asked about her father, and Zariah found herself sharing stories of his final years. His battle with cancer, his unwavering optimism, even in the face of mounting medical bills. "He never stopped believing things would get better," she said, pushing the pasta around on her plate. "Even when the house was about to be foreclosed on, even when the hospital bills kept piling up. He just kept saying everything would work out. But it didn't," Emory said softly. Zariah shook her head. "No. After he died, it was just debt. So much debt. Marcus moved into the house to try to keep it, and I took whatever jobs I could find to help with the payments." "And your mother?" Emory asked cautiously. Zariah's expression hardened. "She left when I was 8, remember? Right after you moved away. Never came back. Never sent a dime." "I didn't know," Emory said, his eyes full of regret. "If I had known, how?" "Could you? You were gone." Zariah set down her fork. "Why did your mother take you away like that, in the middle of the night, without even saying goodbye?" Emory was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "My father was abusive, not physically, but in other ways. He controlled every aspect of our lives, where we went, who we talked to, what we wore. My mother endured it for years, but that night—" He took a deep breath. "That night he threatened to take me away from her, to send me to military school overseas. She panicked and ran with me instead." "I had no idea," Zariah said softly. "You never said anything." "We weren't supposed to. My father made sure of that." Emory's voice held a bitterness that hadn't been there in childhood. "We were the perfect family on the outside. No one knew what went on behind closed doors. So, you just disappeared. To where?" "Chicago first, then Boston. We moved a lot in those early years, always looking over our shoulders. My mother was convinced he would find us and take me away." Emory stood up, moving to the bar to pour himself a drink. "Would you like something?" Zariah shook her head. "No, thank you. So all that time you were running?" "Until I was 16. That's when we found out he had died. Heart attack." Emory took a sip of his whiskey. "By then we had new names, new identities. My mother thought it was safer to keep it that way." "But you wrote to me," Zariah said. "You said you sent letters." Emory set down his glass and walked to a desk in the corner of the room. He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a wooden box, the same one Zariah had glimpsed in her first visit to the penthouse. He brought it back to the table and opened it. Inside, along with the stone paperweight, was a stack of envelopes tied with a faded ribbon. Zariah's heart raced as she recognized her own childish handwriting on them. "My letters," she breathed. "But how?" "My mother," Emory said quietly. "She intercepted them. She was afraid any connection to our old life would lead my father to us. I only found them after she died 5 years ago." With trembling hands, Zariah untied the ribbon and spread the envelopes on the table. There were dozens of them, all addressed. "To Emmett Carter at various addresses. I wrote to you every week for over a year," she said. "I thought you were ignoring me. I thought you'd forgotten all about me." "Never," Emory said, his voice raw with emotion. "I wrote to you too, but when you didn't answer—" "Your mother took your letters too," Zariah realized. "She must have." Emory nodded. "It makes sense. She was terrified of any link to Willowbrook." Zariah picked up one of her old letters, opening it carefully. Inside was a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands standing in front of a house. "I miss you, Emmy," the childish scrawl read. "Please come back soon." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was so hurt when you didn't write back. Eventually I just locked it all away, pretended it didn't matter. That's what children do to survive," Emory said gently. "We both did what we had to." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 22 years of misunderstanding hanging between them. Finally, Zariah looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Why are you buying Willowbrook?" "The truth, Emory." He held her gaze, then sighed. "Initially, because I wanted to erase it. I associated the neighborhood with my father, with all the fear and control. I thought if I could just wipe it off the map, rebuild it into something new, maybe I could finally move on." "And now?" Zariah asked quietly. "Now?" Emory shook his head, looking almost bewildered. "Now I don't know. Seeing you again has brought back memories I'd buried. Good memories. Like the cherry tree," Zariah smiled faintly. "And the creek where we found the wishing stone. And the treehouse your dad built for us," Emory added, his expression softening. "It's still there, you know," Zariah said. "The treehouse, it's a bit worse for wear, but Marcus patched it up a few years ago. His kids play in it now." "Marcus has children?" Emory looked surprised. Zariah nodded. "2 girls, Lily and Grace. They're 7 and 5. She hesitated, then added, "That's why the house means so much to us, Emory. It's not just about the past. It's about their future, too." Understanding dawned in Emory's eyes. "You're not just trying to save your childhood home. You're trying to save their childhood home." "Yes," Zariah said simply. "We lost so much when Dad died. The house is all we have left of him. All the girls have left of their grandfather. If you tear it down—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The parallel was clear. Another generation of children uprooted. Another set of childhood memories erased. Emory was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "The development plan isn't finalized yet. There might be a way to preserve some of the original structures, integrate them into the new design." Hope fluttered in Zariah's chest. "You'd do that?" "I can't make any promises," Emory cautioned. "But I'll talk to my architects, see what's possible." It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a start. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where Emory poured them both coffee. The night view of Manhattan spread out before them, a glittering tapestry of lights. "Tell me about your life," Zariah said. "How did Emmett Carter become Emory Cade, billionaire developer?" A faint smile touched Emory's lips. "That's a long story." "I have time," Zariah said, settling deeper into the plush sofa. And so he told her about studying computer science in college, developing a revolutionary algorithm for real estate valuation, building his first company and selling it for millions, then using that money to start Cade Enterprises, about the risks he'd taken, the setbacks he'd overcome, the empire he'd built from nothing. "What about you?" he asked when he'd finished. "How did Zariah Lane become—" "Zariah Lane," she laughed, softly. "Not nearly as dramatic a transformation." After high school, I got a scholarship to City College, studied hospitality management, dreaming of running a hotel someday. But then Dad got sick and—" She shrugged. "Dreams had to wait. They don't have to wait forever," Emory said quietly. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, a possibility. For a moment, Zariah thought he might reach for her hand, but then his phone buzzed, breaking the spell. Emory glanced at the screen and frowned. "I'm sorry. I need to take this." While he stepped away to take the call, Zariah wandered the living room, looking at the few personal items displayed. There were no family photos, no mementos except for the stone paperweight now back on the side table. It was as if Emory existed only in the present, his past carefully packed away in that wooden box. Except now, she was here, a living reminder of everything he'd tried to forget. When Emory returned, his expression had changed, the warmth replaced by the cool, professional mask she recognized from glass towers. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Just business," he said dismissively. "Nothing important." But Zariah could tell it was more than that. Something in the call had disturbed him, had brought the walls back up. "I should go," she said, sensing the shift in his mood. "It's getting late." Emory nodded, not arguing. "I'll have my driver take you home." As they waited for the elevator, an awkward silence fell between them. The connection they'd felt over dinner seemed suddenly fragile, overshadowed by the realities of their very different lives. "Thank you for dinner," Zariah said formally, "and for showing me the letters." "Zariah," Emory started, then stopped, struggling with words. "This is complicated." "I know," she said, understanding all too well. She was his employee, he was buying her childhood home. Their past was intertwined, but their present circumstances couldn't be more different. The elevator arrived with a soft ping. "I'll be in touch about the development plans," Emory said, his voice professional once more. Zariah nodded, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed between them, she caught a final glimpse of his face, unguarded for just a moment, filled with the same confusion and longing she felt in her own heart. The next morning, Zariah woke to a knock on her apartment door. Opening. Cautiously, she found a courier holding a small package. "Delivery for Zariah Lane," he said, handing her a clipboard to sign. Back inside, she opened the package to find a note and a small velvet box. Inside the box was the stone, the wishing stone from the creek. Emory's note was brief. "This always belonged to both of us. Your turn to keep it safe." Zariah held the stone in her palm, feeling its smooth weight. Why had he sent it now? Was it a peace offering? A goodbye? She couldn't tell. Her phone rang. Marcus. "Z, you're not going to believe this," he said without preamble. "They've withdrawn the offer on the house." "What?" Zariah sat down abruptly. "All of them? The whole neighborhood?" "No, just our house. The developer's still buying the rest of the street, but they specifically excluded our address from the project." Marcus sounded bewildered. "The guy said there's been a change of plans, that they're going to preserve certain historic properties or something. What the hell is going on?" Zariah closed her fingers around the stone, a smile spreading across her face. I think someone's making good on an old promise." "What are you talking about? Do you know something about this?" "It's complicated, Marcus, but yes, I might have had something to do with it." She hesitated, then added, "Do you remember Emmett Carter, the boy who lived down the street when we were kids? Vaguely, wasn't he your best friend or something? The one who moved away?" "He didn't just move away. His mother took him in the middle of the night to escape his abusive father." Zariah took a deep breath. "And now he's back. He's the developer, Marcus. Emmett Carter is Emory Cade." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Zariah thought they might have been disconnected. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Let me get this straight. Your childhood best friend grew up to be a billionaire who's buying our entire neighborhood, except for our house, which he suddenly decided to spare. That's quite a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence," Zariah said. "We reconnected recently. He didn't know I still had ties to Willowbrook until we met again." "And where exactly did you meet this long-lost friend turned billionaire, Zariah?" hesitated. At work. He owns the building where I'm working now. Marcus let out a low whistle. So you're telling me your boss is also your childhood sweetheart, who's also the guy trying to demolish our neighborhood? Zad, this sounds like something from one of those soap operas Dad used to watch. Despite everything, Zariah laughed. I know. Believe me, I know how it sounds. So what happens now? Marcus asked, his voice turning serious. He's still tearing. Down everything around us. What are we supposed to do, live in the last house standing on a construction site? The question sobered Zariah. Emory had spared her family home, but the rest of the neighborhood, the entire community, was still in danger. I don't know, she admitted, but this is a start. He's listening, Marcus. Maybe we can get him to listen more. After hanging up with her brother, Zariah got ready for work, her mind churning with mixed emotions. She was grateful that Emory had spared her family's house, but troubled by the bigger picture. One house saved didn't change the fact that dozens of families would be displaced. The stone sat on her dresser, a reminder of simpler times and childhood promises. But they weren't children anymore. The real world was more complicated than wishing, stones and blanket forts. At Glass Towers, Zariah went through her morning duties on autopilot, her thoughts elsewhere. She hadn't seen Emory since their dinner 2 nights ago, and she wasn't sure where they stood now. Was he avoiding her? Had he regretted their conversation, their connection? Earth to Zariah, Michael said, waving a hand in front of her face. You've been a million miles away all morning. Sorry, Zariah shook her head. Just a lot on my mind. Michael glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. Rumor has it you had dinner with the big boss the other night. Zariah tensed. Who told you that? His driver mentioned it to the doorman, who told the head of security, who told his girlfriend in accounting, who told me. Michael shrugged. News travels fast around here. It wasn't what you're thinking, Zariah said defensively. We have a history. We knew each other as children. Michael's eyebrows shot up. You and Emory Cade grew up together? Now that's a story I want to hear. There's not much to tell, Zariah said, unwilling to share the complicated truth. We were neighbors for a while, that's all. Uh-huh, Michael said, clearly not believing her. Well, whatever it is, be careful. Office romances are tricky enough without adding a billion-dollar power imbalance to the mix. It's not a romance, Zariah insisted, ignoring the flutter in her stomach that suggested otherwise. Before Michael could respond, Ms. Reynolds approached, her expression unusually grave. Zariah, I need to speak with you in my office now. The walk to Ms. Reynolds' office felt like the longest of Zariah's life. Had someone complained about her work? Had Emory said something? Was she about to be fired? Once inside, Ms. Reynolds closed the door and turned to face her, arms crossed. I understand you've been having private meetings with Mr. Cade. Zariah swallowed hard. We had dinner, yes. We're old acquaintances. Old acquaintances, Ms. Reynolds repeated flatly. And does this acquaintance predate your employment here? Yes, Zariah said honestly. We knew each other as children but lost touch. We only recently discovered the connection. Ms. Reynolds studied her for a long moment. Zariah, I hired you because you were qualified, professional, and discreet. I need to know if your personal relationship with Mr. Cade is going to interfere with your work here. It won't, Zariah promised. I can keep things separate. Can you? Ms. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Because the word around the building is that Mr. Cade has suddenly pulled out of a property acquisition in the Bronx, a property that happens to belong to your family. Zariah felt the blood drain from her face. How did you... It's my job to know things, especially things that might impact Glass Towers. Ms. Reynolds sighed. Look, I don't care what's going on between you and Mr. Cade personally, but I do care about conflicts of interest that could affect this building or its residents. I understand, Zariah said quietly. It won't be a problem. Ms. Reynolds didn't look convinced. For now, I'm going to reassign you to the daytime shift on the lower floors. Let's put some distance between you and the penthouse until this situation resolves itself. It wasn't a firing, but it felt like a demotion. Zariah nodded, accepting the decision without argument. She had known there would be consequences to reconnecting with Emory. She just hadn't expected them to come so quickly. As she left Ms. Reynolds' office, her phone buzzed with a text from Emory. "Need to see you. Meet me at the park entrance on 72nd at 7 tonight." Zariah hesitated. Seeing him again would only complicate things further, both professionally and personally. The smart thing would be to establish boundaries, to keep their relationship strictly professional until she figured out what she really wanted. But her heart had other ideas. "I'll be there," she texted back. Central Park at dusk was magical, the fading light painting the trees golden, the city sounds muffled by distance and foliage. Zariah spotted Emory waiting by the entrance, dressed casually again in jeans and a dark jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. It was his attempt at anonymity, she realized, a way to avoid the attention his usual appearance would draw. "Thanks for coming," he said as she approached. "I thought we could walk. It's easier to talk without walls and windows around us." They fell into step together, following a winding path deeper into the park. For a while neither spoke, content to walk in companionable silence as the park lights began to flicker on around them. "You withdrew the offer on my family's house," Zariah finally said. Emory nodded. "It seemed like the right thing to do." "Thank you," she said sincerely. "It means more than you know." "Your brother wasn't too pleased when my people told him," Emory said with a faint smile. "I got the impression he was actually considering selling." "Marcus is practical," Zariah sighed, and tired of struggling. "The money would have solved a lot of problems for him." "I could still make him an offer," Emory suggested. "A private one, not connected to the development. If he wants to sell, it should be his choice." Zariah shook her head. "It's not just about the money. It's about what that house represents. To him, to his daughters, to me. It's the last piece of our father we have left." They reached a bench overlooking a small pond, its surface mirroring the lights of the buildings beyond the park. Emory gestured for them to sit. "I've been thinking about the development," he said after a moment. "About Willowbrook." Zariah's heart quickened. And I'm not sure I can justify destroying a community just because I have bad memories of this place." Emory ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded Zariah of the boy he had been. "Especially now that I have good memories too, memories that are coming back because of you." "So, what are you saying?" Zariah asked cautiously. "I'm saying maybe there's a better approach. Revitalization instead of demolition. Preserving what works, improving what doesn't." He turned to face her directly. "I'd like your input on it, actually. You know the neighborhood, the people, what it needs, what it doesn't." Zariah stared at him in surprise. "You want my opinion on your development project?" "Is that so strange?" Emory asked. "You care about Willowbrook. You understand its value in ways I've forgotten." "It's just unexpected," Zariah admitted. "A few days ago, you were planning to tear it all down. A few days ago, I hadn't remembered what it felt like to sit in a treehouse with my best friend, planning our future." Emory's voice softened. "A lot has changed since then." Their eyes met, and Zariah felt the same connection that had sparked between them in his penthouse, a pull that went beyond their shared past, beyond nostalgia or childhood affection. Something new and yet familiar, like coming home to a place she'd never been. "Zariah," Emory began, his voice low and uncertain. "I know this is complicated. Our history, our present circumstances, it's a lot to navigate. But I can't help feeling that finding you again means something." Before she could respond, a jogger passed by their bench, momentarily breaking the intimate bubble they'd created. When he was gone, the moment had shifted, the vulnerability in Emory's expression replaced by something more guarded. "Ms. Reynolds reassigned me today," Zariah said, deciding to change the subject. "Because of our connection," Emory frowned. "I can speak to her—" "No," Zariah cut him off firmly. "That would only make things worse. She's right to be concerned about conflicts of interest, and honestly, so should you." "What do you mean?" "Emory, you're my boss. You own the building where I work. That creates a power imbalance, whether we want it to or not." Zariah took a deep breath. "And then there's Willowbrook. Whatever your intentions, you're still the person threatening my brother's home, my neighbor's livelihoods. Even if I change the plans, Emory asked. Even then, Zariah said gently, these things don't just disappear because we wish they would. They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of their situation hanging between them like a glass wall, transparent but impenetrable. So where does that leave us? Emory finally asked. Zariah looked out over the pond, watching the ripples disturb, the perfect reflection of the city lights. I don't know, she admitted. I'm still trying to reconcile the boy I knew with the man you've become, and I think maybe you're doing the same with me. Emory nodded slowly. The past few days have been disorienting. Finding you again, learning about the letters, remembering things I'd buried so deep I thought they were gone forever. For me too, Zariah said. It's like finding a missing piece of myself, a part I didn't even know was lost. As the night grew cooler, they began walking back toward the park entrance. Their hands brushed occasionally, neither quite brave enough to reach for the other, yet both reluctant to maintain the distance that propriety demanded. There's an event this weekend, Emory said as they neared the exit. A charity gala for the children's hospital. I'm expected to attend. He hesitated, then added, I'd like you to come with me, as my guest, not as staff. Zariah looked up at him in surprise. You want me to be your date? To a public event? Is that so hard to believe? Emory asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. It's just, you're Emory Cade, you could have anyone. I don't want anyone, he said simply. I want you there with me. The only person who knew me before I was Emory Cade, when I was just Emmett, the skinny kid from Willowbrook. Put that way, how could she refuse? Despite all the complications, despite all the reasons to keep her distance, Zariah found herself nodding. Okay, she said, I'll come. The smile that spread across Emory's face was worth every doubt, every risk. For a moment, she could see the boy beneath the billionaire's facade, the boy who had shared his wishing stone with her, who had promised to marry her under a blanket fort. What she couldn't see was the figure watching them from the shadows of the trees, a camera capturing their every move, their every expression. Nor could she know how those images would soon threaten everything they were just beginning to rebuild. As they parted ways at the park entrance, Emory's driver waiting discreetly nearby, Zariah felt both lighter and heavier than she had in years. Lighter because she had found a piece of her past she thought was lost forever. Heavier because she knew deep down that this story was far from over. The journey back to her childhood friend had only just begun, and the path ahead was shadowed, with obstacles neither of them could yet see. The next morning, Zariah arrived at work to find Glass Towers in an unusual state of agitation. Staff members huddled in small groups, their voices hushed, their expressions concerned. As she approached the employee break room, Michael hurried to intercept her. You haven't seen it yet, have you? He asked, his face grim. Seen what? Zariah asked, a sense of dread building in her stomach. Michael pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. It was open to a gossip website, the headline blaring, Reclusive Billionaire's Secret Romance with Employee. Below the headline were photos, Emory and Zariah walking in Central Park, sitting close on the bench, their expressions intimate and unguarded. The final photo showed them standing at the park entrance, Emory's hand reaching for hers, their faces illuminated by the streetlights. Hey, it's all over the internet, Michael said quietly. They're calling you his mystery woman. Zariah felt the blood drain from her face. How? Who took these? Paparazzi, probably. Cade's a prime target, young, rich, and notoriously private. A secret girlfriend is exactly the kind of story they live for. I'm not his girlfriend, Zariah protested weakly. But even to her own ears, the denial sounded hollow. The photos told a different story. The way they looked at each other, the closeness, the obvious connection. Before she could say more, Ms. Reynolds appeared at the end of the hallway, her expression thunderous. Lane, my office, now. As Zariah followed her supervisor down the corridor, she could feel the eyes of every staff member on her back, could hear the whispers that fell silent as she passed. In the span of a few hours, she had gone from being just another employee to the center of a scandal that threatened not only her job, but the careful balance she and Emory had been trying to maintain. Close the door, Miss Reynolds said when they reached her office. Zariah did as instructed, then stood before the desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to hide their trembling. "I assume you've seen the photos," Miss Reynolds began, her voice ice-cold. "Just now, yes. Then you understand why I have to ask, are you in a relationship with Emory Cade?" Zariah hesitated. What could she say? That they were childhood friends reconnecting? That they were something more than friends but less than lovers? That she didn't know what they were, only what they might become? "It's complicated," she finally said. Ms. Reynolds' expression didn't soften. "Complicated isn't good enough, Zariah. Not when the reputation of Glass Towers is at stake. The reputation of... I don't understand. How does my personal life affect the building's reputation?" "Because perception is reality in this world," Ms. Reynolds said sharply. "And right now, the perception is that Emory Cade, one of the most eligible bachelors in New York, is having a secret affair with a staff member. Do you have any idea how that looks?" Zariah felt a flush of anger. "I don't care how it looks. What matters is the truth." "The truth?" Ms. Reynolds laughed without humor. "The truth is irrelevant. What matters is the story people believe." She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "And let me tell you what story they're going to believe. That you used your position to get close to a wealthy man, that you're sleeping your way to the top." The accusation stung like a slap. "That's not what happened," Zariah said, her voice tight with emotion. "Emory and I knew each other long before I started working here, so you've said. But I have to consider what's best for Glass Towers, for our residents, and for Mr. Cade himself." Ms. Reynolds straightened, her decision clearly made. "I'm placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately, until this situation resolves itself." "You're suspending me?" Zariah asked in disbelief. "For what? Having dinner with a friend? Taking a walk in a public park?" "For creating a conflict of interest that now threatens the reputation of this building and its owner." Ms. Reynolds' tone was final. "You can collect your personal items and turn in your access card on your way out." As Zariah left the office, stunned and hurt, her phone buzzed with a text from Emory. "Have you seen it? I'm so sorry. Where are you?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Not yet. First, she needed to process what had just happened. Needed to understand how her life had spun so completely out of control in the span of a week, from finding her childhood best friend to losing her job over a set of photos that told only part of the story. It was too much, too fast. As she gathered her few personal items from her locker, another text came through, this one from Marcus Z. "Call me now. Just got ambushed by reporters outside the house, asking about your billionaire boyfriend." What the hell is going on? Zariah closed her eyes, a wave of nausea washing over her. The reporters had found her brother, her nieces. How long before they dug deeper, discovered the connection between Emory's development project and her family. Home? How long before their private reconnection became public fodder for speculation and gossip? She had thought finding Emory again was like finding a missing piece of herself. Now she wondered if that piece might cost her everything else she had built, her job, her privacy, her hard-won stability. As she handed in her access card at the security desk, Zariah caught a glimpse of the stone in her bag, the wishing stone from the creek, the symbol of their childhood bond. Once it had represented possibility, magic, the power of belief. Now it felt like a weight, a reminder of how quickly wishes could turn to complications and how easily the past could disrupt the present. Outside Glass Towers, the street was quiet, the morning rush hour over. Zariah stood on the sidewalk, uncertain where to go, what to do. The life she had carefully constructed was suddenly in pieces, and she had no blueprint for putting it back together. Her phone rang, Emory again. This time, she answered. "Zariah, thank God." His voice was tense with worry. "Where are you?" "Outside Glass Towers," she said flatly. "I've been put on administrative leave." A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Because of the photos." "Because of us," she corrected. "This isn't just about some pictures, Emory. It's about what happens when your private life becomes public property. And right now my life, my job, my brother, my nieces is collateral damage in your story. Our story, he said quietly. And I want to fix this, Zariah. Tell me how to fix this. But that was just it. Zariah wasn't sure there was a fix, not one that wouldn't require sacrifices neither of them was prepared to make, not one that wouldn't change who they were, what they might become together. I don't know if you can, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. I don't know if anyone can. As she ended the call, Zariah felt a drop of rain on her cheek, then another. The sky had darkened while she was inside, and now the heavens opened, a summer storm washing over the city. She stood there, letting the rain soak through her clothes, wondering if it could wash away the complications that had sprung up around them, if it could clear a path through the tangle of past and present, of secrets and revelations, of wishes made and promises broken. But some storms don't clear paths. They only reveal how fragile the ground beneath our feet really is. And as Zariah finally hailed a taxi to take her home, she knew that the real tempest was yet to come. The rain hadn't let up by the time Zariah reached her apartment in the Bronx. She was soaked through, her clothes clinging to her skin, her hair plastered to her face. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional storm raging inside her. As she fumbled with her keys, her neighbor Mrs. Guzman poked her head out of her door. "Zariah, I've been trying to call you all morning." The older woman's eyes were wide with excitement. "There are reporters asking about you. They showed me your picture with some handsome rich man. Is it true? Are you dating a billionaire?" Zariah closed her eyes briefly. "Not now, Mrs. Guzman, please." Something in her tone must have communicated her distress, because Mrs. Guzman's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Are you okay, Mija? You look terrible." "I'm fine," Zariah lied. "Just need some time alone." Once inside her apartment, Zariah peeled off her wet clothes and stepped into a hot shower, letting the water wash away the physical chill, if not the emotional one. Her mind raced with questions and fears. What would happen to her job? How would she pay her bills without it? What about her brother and nieces, now thrust into a spotlight they never asked for, and Emory? What about Emory, the man who had once been her best friend, who had somehow found his way back into her life only to upend it completely? Part of her wanted to blame him for the photos, for the scandal, for the whole impossible situation. But she knew it wasn't that simple. They had both walked into this with eyes wide open, both chosen to explore the connection that still sparked between them, despite all the reasons not to. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she got home. Text messages, voicemails, even emails from reporters who had somehow found her personal contact information. She ignored them all, needing space to think, to breathe, until one call she couldn't ignore. Marcus. "Z, what the hell is going on?" he demanded as soon as she answered. "There are photographers outside the house. The girls are scared. Their teacher called to ask if they're related to the woman dating Emory Cade. This is insane." "I know, Marcus." "I know," Zariah said, her voice tired. "I'm so sorry. I never thought this would happen." "Well, it has happened, and now I need to know what to do about it." Marcus sounded more worried than angry. "These people are relentless. They're asking about the house, about why Cade withdrew his offer. They know things, Z. Things they shouldn't." "No?" Zariah's stomach clenched. "What kind of things?" "They know Dad died of cancer. They know about the medical bills. They're piecing together the whole story. Your job at Glass Towers, our house in Willowbrook, the development project. It's only a matter of time before they figure out the rest. The rest, that Emory and Zariah had been childhood friends, that his mother had hidden their letters, that their reconnection was more than just a boss-employee romance. That was their story, their private truth. The thought of it being dissected by strangers, twisted into clickbait headlines, made Zariah feel physically ill. "I'm coming over," she decided. "You and the girls shouldn't be alone right now." "What? About Cade?" Marcus asked. "Have you talked to him? Is he doing anything about this?" "I don't know," Zariah admitted. "We haven't really... it's complicated." Marcus snorted. "Yeah, I'd say dating a billionaire while he tries to bulldoze. Our neighborhood is pretty complicated." "He's not bulldozing our house," Zariah pointed out. He specifically excluded it from the development. Great. So we'll be the one original house left standing in his fancy new complex. That makes everything better. Zariah sighed. I'll be there. In an hour, just don't talk to any reporters, okay? After hanging up, Zariah quickly dried her hair and changed into fresh clothes. As she gathered her things, her phone buzzed with another text from Emory. We need to talk. Please, let me send a car for you. She hesitated, then texted back. Going to Marcus's house. Reporters there too. Need to help my family first. His response was immediate. I understand. I'm working on a statement to redirect the media attention. We'll let you know when it's done. Zariah appreciated his understanding, but she wasn't sure any statement could undo the damage already done. The story was out there, spreading like wildfire through social media and gossip sites. They're private. Reconnection had become public property, a source of entertainment for strangers who knew nothing about their shared past or complicated present. As she left her apartment building, Zariah pulled a baseball cap low over her face and slipped on sunglasses despite the overcast day. It was a pathetic attempt at disguise, but it made her feel slightly less exposed as she headed for the subway. The ride to Willowbrook seemed to take forever. Zariah kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with other passengers, paranoid that someone might recognize her from the photos. By the time she emerged at her old neighborhood station, her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. The first thing she noticed as she approached her childhood home was the cluster of cars and vans parked along the street. News vans, she realized with a sinking feeling. As she got closer, she could see reporters with cameras and microphones positioned at the end of the driveway, kept at bay by a makeshift barrier of police tape. Zariah circled around to the back of the house, approaching through Mrs. Winter's yard, the same Mrs. Winters who now lived at Glass Towers, whose cherry tree she and Emory had climbed as children. The irony wasn't lost on her. She slipped through the back door, finding Marcus in the kitchen with his daughters. Lily and Grace sat at the table, coloring quietly, their small faces solemn. At 7 and 5, they were too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to sense the tension in the air. Aunt Z, Grace cried, jumping up to hug her. Daddy says we can't go outside because of the bad people with cameras. They're not bad people, sweetie, Zariah corrected gently, hugging her niece close. They're just doing their jobs. But sometimes they forget that the people they're taking pictures of have feelings too. Why do they want to take our picture? Lily asked, more wary than her younger sister. Are we famous now? Marcus and Zariah exchanged looks over the girls' heads. No, honey, Marcus said. They're interested in Aunt Zariah because she knows someone important. The man in the big building? Grace asked. Daddy showed us the pictures on his phone. He looks like a prince. Despite everything, Zariah had to smile at her niece's assessment. Emory did have a certain regal quality about him, the way he carried himself, the quiet authority in his voice. He's not a prince, she said. He's just a man who grew up right here in this neighborhood, just like me and your dad. Really? Lily's eyes widened. In Willowbrook? Really? Zariah nodded. In fact, he used to live just down the street. Before he got rich and decided to tear it all down, Marcus muttered, low enough that the girls couldn't hear. Zariah shot him a warning look. Girls, why don't you go play in your room for a bit? I need to talk to your dad. Once the children were upstairs, Zariah collapsed into a kitchen chair, the events of the day finally catching up with her. This is a nightmare. You're telling me, Marcus said, pushing a mug of coffee toward her. I had to call in sick to work today. Couldn't exactly leave the house with that media circus out front. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know you didn't. He sat down across from her, his expression softening. But it has happened, and now we need to figure out what to do about it. He hesitated, then asked, So what's the real story here, Z? What's going on with you and Cade? Zariah cradled the warm mug between her hands, finding comfort in its solidity. Honestly, I'm not sure. We reconnected, realized who we were to each other. There's still something there, something that never really died. But it's all so complicated now. Because he's your boss? That, and because of Willowbrook, and now this media frenzy. She looked up at her brother. I've been suspended from my job, Marcus. Put on administrative leave until this blows over, if it ever does. Marcus winced. That's rough. I'm sorry. Me too. Zariah took a sip of her coffee. The irony is, I took that job to help pay Dad's medical bills, to get some stability, and now here I am right back where I started. It's not exactly where you started, Marcus pointed out. Now you've got a billionaire in your corner. That's got to count for something. Before Zariah could respond, her phone rang. Emory again. This time she answered. Zariah, I've just issued a statement through my PR team, Emory said without preamble. It confirms that we're friends who grew up in the same neighborhood and reconnected recently. Nothing more, nothing less. It also asks the media to respect our privacy and the privacy of our families. Will that work? Zariah asked skeptically. It should redirect some of the attention at least, Emory said. I've also sent private security to your brother's house. They should be arriving any minute. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Marcus went to answer it and returned with two men in suits who introduced themselves as security consultants hired by Emory Cade. Mr. Cade has authorized us to secure the perimeter and keep the press at a reasonable distance, one of them explained. We'll be discreet but effective. Marcus looked at Zariah, eyebrows raised in surprise. Well, I guess that's one problem solved. After the security team left to take up their positions outside, Zariah returned to her call with Emory. Thank you for that, she said. Marcus and the girls were feeling pretty trapped. It's the least I could do, Emory replied, his voice tight with frustration. This is my fault, Zariah. If I hadn't asked you to meet me in the park, if I'd been more careful, we both made choices, Zariah interrupted. And neither of us could have predicted this. There was a pause. Then Emory asked, Can I see you? Not in public, somewhere private. We need to talk about what happens next. I don't know, Emory. Things are so chaotic right now. Please, he said, and there was something in his voice, a vulnerability, a need, that she couldn't ignore. There's more going on than you know. More that I need to tell you. Zariah glanced at Marcus, who was watching her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Let me talk to my brother first. I'll call you back. After ending the call, she explained the situation to Marcus. He wants to meet somewhere private to talk. Says there's more I need to know. So go, Marcus shrugged. The security guys are here now. We'll be fine. Are you sure? I don't want to leave you dealing with this mess alone. Z, I love you, but this mess involves both of you. Maybe it's time you figured out exactly what you're dealing with. Marcus gave her a small smile. Besides, the girls are thrilled about having bodyguards outside. They think we're super important now. Zariah couldn't help but laugh at that. Okay, but call me if anything happens, anything at all, she texted Emory. Where and when? His response came quickly. My mother's old house in Connecticut. Private, secure, I can send a car in 30 minutes. Connecticut. That seemed extreme, but then again, they could hardly meet at Glass Towers or any public place in the city without risking more. Unwanted attention. And she was curious about this house she'd never known about. This place where Emory had gone after leaving Willowbrook. I'll be ready, she texted back. The car that came for Zariah was not the sleek black town car she expected, but a nondescript, grey sedan with tinted windows. The driver, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense attitude, introduced herself simply as Kate. Mr. Cade thought a less conspicuous vehicle would be wise, she explained, as they pulled away from Marcus's house. We'll be taking a somewhat circuitous route to avoid being followed. The drive to Connecticut took nearly 2 hours with the detours Kate insisted on. Zariah spent most of it staring out the window, watching the urban landscape gradually give way to suburbs and then to the lush greenery of rural Connecticut. The rain had finally stopped, leaving everything looking washed clean, the colors more vivid against the backdrop of gray clouds. They eventually turned onto a private road that wound through dense woods before opening onto a clearing where a modest but well-maintained colonial house stood. It wasn't at all what Zariah had expected, not a mansion or estate, but a simple family home with a wraparound porch and shuttered windows. Emory was waiting on the porch, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. As Zariah got out of the car, She was struck again by how different he looked away from Glass Towers, away from the trappings of his billionaire persona. Here, he seemed more like the boy she remembered, less guarded, more real. "Thank you for me coming," he said as she approached, "especially given everything." "You said there was more I needed to know," Zariah replied, getting straight to the point. "So here I am." Emory nodded, opening the front door to usher her inside. The interior of the house was comfortably furnished but somewhat impersonal, like a high-end rental property. There were few personal touches, few signs that this had once been someone's home. "My mother bought this place when I was 16, Emory explained, leading her into a living room with large windows overlooking a small garden. "After my father died and we felt safe enough to stop running, she lived here until her death 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Zariah said sincerely. "About your mother, we never really talked about that." Emory's expression tightened. "Thank you. It was difficult. She never really recovered from those years of fear of looking over her shoulder. Even after my father was gone, she kept expecting him to appear, to take everything away again." Zariah sat on the sofa, taking in her surroundings. "So this is where the letters were all those years?" "Yes," Emory nodded. "I found them in a locked box in her closet after she died, along with other things she'd kept from Willowbrook. Photos, newspaper clippings, even a few of my old toys." He sat in an armchair across from her. "But that's not what I brought you. Here to discuss." "Then what is it?" Zariah asked, a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Emory leaned forward, his expression serious. "The photos in the park weren't an accident, Zariah. We were set up." "What do you mean, set up? By who?" "By someone who knew exactly where we would be and when." Emory ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Zariah was beginning to recognize as a sign of his agitation. "Someone who wanted to expose our connection, to force my hand." "I don't understand." Zariah shook her head. "Who would do that, and why?" "I have enemies, Zariah. People who would love to see me fail, to find leverage against me." Emory stood up, too restless to remain seated. "The Willowbrook development isn't just a personal project for me. It's strategically important for Cade Enterprises, a cornerstone of our expansion into mixed-use communities. So someone is trying to sabotage your business by, what, making it look like you're dating an employee?" Zariah frowned, skeptical. "That seems like a stretch. Not just any employee. An employee with ties to Willowbrook, with a brother who owns one of the properties I'm trying to acquire." Emory stopped pacing to look at her directly. "Think about it, Zariah. What's the narrative now? Billionaire developer spares girlfriend's family home while bulldozing the rest of the neighborhood. It makes me look corrupt, playing favorites. It undermines the entire project." Zariah felt a chill run through her. Put that way, the timing of the photos did seem suspicious. But how would anyone know about our connection? About my brother's house? That's what I've been trying to figure out. Emory returned to his seat, his voice dropping lower. "And I think I know. It has to be someone who knew about our past, someone who's been tracking both of us." "That could be anyone from Willowbrook," Zariah pointed out. "Mrs. Winters recognized me at Glass Towers. Others might have made the connection too. It's more than that." Emory hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "There's something I haven't told you, something I discovered recently. The reason I initially targeted Willowbrook for development." Zariah waited, tension building in her chest. "My father's company still exists," Emory finally said, "under a different name, different management, but with the same core business. And they've been buying properties in Willowbrook too, working through shell companies to hide their involvement." "Your father's company?" Zariah repeated, confused. "But I thought he died years ago." "He did, but his business partner, Victor Reynolds, kept it going." Emory watched her face carefully as he added, "Patricia Reynolds' husband." The name hit Zariah like a physical blow. "Ms. Reynolds, my boss at Glass Towers? Her husband was your father's business partner?" Emory nodded, grimly. "And I believe they've known who you were from the moment you applied for the job. I think they orchestrated the whole thing, getting you hired at Glass Towers, making sure our paths would cross, then exposing our connection at the most damaging moment possible." Zariah's mind raced, trying to process this new information. But why? What do they gain from this? Control of Willowbrook. Emory stood again, moving to a desk in the corner of the room. He returned with a folder which he placed on the coffee table between them. I've been investigating them for months. Victor Reynolds was buying up properties in Willowbrook long before I showed any interest in the area, but he was doing it quietly, slowly, staying under the radar. Zariah opened the folder to find maps, property records, corporate filings, a paper trail connecting various shell companies back to Reynolds Development Group. When I announced my plans for Willowbrook, it forced their hand, Emory continued. They couldn't compete with me openly. I have more resources, more influence, so they decided to use our connection against me instead. Our connection, Zariah repeated softly. But how did they even know about it? Emory's expression darkened. Because Victor Reynolds was more than just my father's business partner. He was his confidant, the one person who knew all our family secrets, including where we went after we left Willowbrook. The implications of what Emory was saying began to sink in. Are you suggesting that Victor Reynolds was the one who intercepted our letters? Emory finished for her. Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. My mother always believed someone was helping my father track us, someone who made sure any communication to or from Willowbrook never reached us. Zariah felt dizzy with the revelation, all those years of silence, of believing Emory had forgotten her, orchestrated by a man she'd never even met for reasons that had nothing to do with her. So when I applied to Glass Towers, she began. Patricia Reynolds recognized your name, your background. She saw an opportunity. Emory's voice was tight with controlled anger. They probably thought they could use you to get information about my plans for Willowbrook, maybe even influence me through you. But when we actually reconnected, when I withdrew the offer on your family's house, they decided to expose us instead, Zariah finished, to make it look like our relationship was influencing your business decisions. Exactly. Emory sat back down, his shoulders slumping slightly. I'm so sorry, Zariah. I never meant to drag you into this. Zariah was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything she'd learned. It was almost too much to process, this conspiracy that had apparently shaped both their lives, from childhood to the present day. So what do we do now? She finally asked. We fight back, Emory said, determination replacing the weariness in his voice. I'm not going to let them win, not after everything they've already taken from us. How? I have a plan, but it's risky, and I can't ask you to be part of it unless you're absolutely sure. Emory leaned forward, his eyes intense. Because once we start this, there's no going back. For either of us. Zariah thought about her job at Glass Towers already in jeopardy, about her brother and nieces caught in the crossfire of a battle they didn't even know existed, about the neighborhood she'd grown up in, now a prize in a corporate war between Emory and the man who had helped keep them apart for over 20 years. Tell me the plan, she said. Back in New York, Patricia Reynolds sat in her husband's sleek downtown office, watching him review the latest news coverage on his tablet. The photos are everywhere, Victor said with satisfaction. Every major gossip site, social media, even some of the legitimate news outlets are picking it up. Billionaire developer's secret romance with employee raises ethical questions. It's perfect. He sent her on administrative leave, Patricia reported, as I knew he would. He's too cautious to do anything else, too concerned with appearances, Victor nodded approvingly. And how did she take it? Not well. She left immediately, hasn't been back to the building. Patricia's smile was cold. I made sure to imply that her connection to Cade looked opportunistic. That should create some distance between them. Excellent. Victor set down his tablet. And her brother? Any movement there? Not yet. But with the media camped outside his house and Cade's development moving forward all around him, it's only a matter of time before he reconsiders our offer. Victor rose from behind his desk, moving to the window that overlooked the city skyline. At 62, he was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting his way. 25 years, he said, more to himself than to Patricia. 25 years I've waited to take back what should have been mine, and now it's finally happening. Patricia joined him at the window, slipping her arm through his. At 55, she was still striking, her blonde hair expertly colored and styled, her figure maintained through rigorous diet and exercise. They made a formidable couple, their marriage as much a business partnership as a romantic one. "What about Cade?" she asked. "He won't just roll over and accept defeat." "No, he won't," Victor agreed. "He's too much like his father for that, stubborn, arrogant, but unlike his father, he has a weakness." The girl. Victor's smile didn't reach. His eyes. Sentimentality. James Carter would have never let a childhood friendship interfere with business. But Emory, he shook his head. He's soft. And that softness will be his undoing. Patricia's phone chimed with an alert. She checked it, her expression hardening. "Security reports that Zariah Lane left her brother's house 2 hours ago in an unidentified vehicle. They lost track of her on the highway." Victor frowned. Where would she go? To him, obviously. Patricia's voice held a hint of contempt. "They're probably holed up in his penthouse or some discreet hotel, trying to figure out their next move. Have our sources at Glass Towers keep an eye out, and increase the offer on her brother's house again. Let's add another 20% and a relocation bonus." Victor turned away from the window, his decision made. "It's time to force their hand." Patricia nodded, already typing instructions on her phone. "And if they still refuse?" Victor's expression hardened. "Then we move to Plan B. Sometimes to build something new, you have to burn down what's already there." The ominous statement hung in the air between them, a promise of escalation neither would hesitate to fulfill. The battle for Willowbrook, and for the future of Zariah and Emory, was about to enter a dangerous new phase. The security team Emory had sent to Marcus's house reported a new development shortly after midnight. A car had pulled up, and a man had approached the house, speaking briefly with one of the security guards before leaving an envelope and driving away. "It's another offer," Marcus told Zariah when he called, "even higher than before, plus money to relocate anywhere we want. Private school tuition for the girls, the works." Zariah sat on the edge of the bed in one of the guest rooms at Emory's Connecticut house, where she had decided to stay overnight. Emory had given her privacy for the call, understanding that she and Marcus needed to talk freely. "What are you thinking?" she asked her brother. Marcus sighed heavily. "I'm thinking it's a lot of money, Z. Money that could give the girls opportunities they'd never have otherwise. Money that could finally pay off Dad's medical bills and give us a fresh start." "But," Zariah prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice, "but I keep asking myself why. Why are they so determined to get this specific house? It's not the biggest or the nicest on the block. There's nothing special about it except that it's ours," Zariah finished for him, "and that Emory specifically excluded it from his development plans." "Exactly." Marcus paused, then asked, "What's really going on here, Z? This isn't just about some development project anymore, is it?" Zariah hesitated, unsure how much to share. Emory's plan required discretion, required that only a select few know the full truth. But this was her brother, and his family was at risk too. "No, it's not," she admitted. "It's complicated. There's history here, old grudges that go back decades, and we're caught in the middle of it. We or you and your billionaire boyfriend?" Marcus's tone wasn't accusatory, just concerned. "Both, I guess." Zariah took a deep breath. "Marcus, I need you to trust me on this. Don't sell the house. Not yet. Give us a little more time to figure things out." Time is the one thing we might not have, Z. These people, whoever they are, they're playing hardball. The reporters, the offers, the pressure, it's all escalating. And I've got the girls to think about. "I know," Zariah said softly. "And I would never ask you to put them at risk. But please, just a few more days. Emory and I are working on something that might change everything." After a long pause, Marcus finally agreed. "A few days. But that's it, Z. If things don't change, by then I have to do what's best for my daughters." "I understand," Zariah said, relief washing over her. "Thank you." After ending the call, Zariah went to find Emory. He was in his mother's old study, surrounded by papers and laptops, working on the details of their plan. He looked up when she entered, his expression questioning. "Marcus is giving us a few days," she reported, "but that's all we have." Emory nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "It'll be enough. I've already contacted my legal team, my PR people, and a few trusted allies in the city council. Everything is in motion." Zariah sat down across from him, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Do you really think this will work? That we can beat them at their own game?" Emory reached across the desk to take her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I do know that I'm not going to let them take anything else from us. Not Willowbrook, not your job, not our chance to—" He trailed off, but his eyes finished the sentence for him. "Not our chance to be together." Zariah felt a flutter in her chest, a warmth that spread through her despite all the uncertainty surrounding them. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together, just as they had promised each other under a blanket fort all those years ago. "So," she said, squeezing his hand, "tell me again about this gala." Emory's expression shifted to determination. "The Children's Hospital benefit. This Saturday night. Every major player in New York real estate will be there, including Victor Reynolds." "And we'll be there too," Zariah said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Together. Publicly. Together," Emory confirmed, making a statement that can't be ignored or twisted by the media. "And while all eyes are on us—" "Your team makes their move," Zariah finished, "exposing Reynolds' illegal activities, his connection to your father, everything." "Exactly." Emory's gaze held hers, serious and intense. "But it means putting yourself in the spotlight, Zariah, facing the scrutiny, the questions, the judgment. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Was she ready? To step into Emory's world, to stand beside him under the glare of public attention, to confront the man who had helped keep them apart for over 20 years. It was terrifying, overwhelming. And yet when she looked at Emory, at the man who had once been the boy who shared his wishing stone with her, who had written her letters that never arrived, who had carried her memory through all the years of silence, she knew her answer. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Let's do this together." Emory's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, warm and full of promise. For the first time since the photos had appeared, since her world had been turned upside down, Zariah felt something that had been missing for too long. Hope. But, as they bent their heads together over the plans, refining details and preparing for the confrontation to come, neither of them noticed the small red light blinking on one of the laptops, a silent indicator that someone was watching, listening, learning their every move. The battle for Willowbrook was about to take a dangerous turn, and the stakes were higher than either of them realized. The night of the Children's Hospital benefit arrived with a sense of inevitability. For 3 days, Zariah and Emory had worked tirelessly on their plan, coordinating with lawyers, investigators, and trusted allies. Now as Zariah stood in front of the mirror in one of the guest bedrooms of Emory's Connecticut house, she barely recognized herself. The woman reflected back at her wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered with subtle beading, her hair swept up in an elegant style that highlighted her cheekbones and exposed the graceful curve of her neck. Diamond earrings, borrowed from Emory's mother's collection, caught the light when she moved her head. She looked like someone who belonged in Emory's world, someone comfortable with wealth and privilege, but inside she was still Zariah Lane from Willowbrook, the girl who had grown up counting pennies and wearing second-hand clothes, who had worked multiple jobs to help pay her father's medical bills, the girl who had lost her best friend and locked away the pain for over 20 years. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Emory entered, handsome in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He stopped short when he saw her, his expression shifting from determination to something softer, more vulnerable. "Zariah," he said, her name almost a whisper on his lips. "You look beautiful," she smiled, smoothing down the unfamiliar fabric of the gown. "Thank you. It's all a bit much, isn't it? The dress, the jewelry." "No," Emory shook his head. "It's just right. You're just right." He crossed the room to stand beside her, both of them now reflected in the mirror. A couple who looked as if they belonged together, despite all the forces that had kept them apart. "Are you ready for this?" Emory asked, his eyes meeting hers, in the reflection. "As ready as I'll ever be," Zariah replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Have you heard from your team?" Emory nodded. "Everything is in place. The investigators have compiled all the evidence of Reynolds' illegal activities, the shell companies, the property manipulations, the bribes to city officials, and my legal team is standing by with the injunction to halt all development in Willowbrook pending a full investigation. And the press? They'll be there in force. Once we make our announcement, there's no going back. Reynolds, his company, and everyone connected to him will be under scrutiny." Emory hesitated, then added, "including Patricia." Zariah thought about her former boss, the woman who had hired her while knowing exactly who she was, who had been part of the conspiracy to manipulate her and Emory from the beginning. The betrayal still stung, but she had moved beyond anger to determination. "Good," she said firmly. "They've had this coming for a long time." Emory checked his watch. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we step into that ballroom together, your life will never be the same. The media attention, the scrutiny, it doesn't go away." Zariah turned to face him directly, no longer looking at their reflection but at the real man standing beside her. "I lost you once because of Victor Reynolds and his schemes. I'm not losing you again." Emory's expression softened, and he reached out to touch her cheek gently. "I've missed you for so long, Zariah. Even when I didn't remember exactly what I was missing, there was always this emptiness, this sense that something crucial was gone." "I know," she said softly. "I felt it too." For a moment they stood there in silence, the connection between them almost tangible, a bridge across the years of separation, the misunderstandings, the pain. Then Emory leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle touch of his lips against hers. That held the promise of a future neither had dared to imagine until now. When they parted, Zariah smiled up at him. "Now I'm definitely ready." The ringing of Emory's phone broke the moment. He checked the screen, frowning slightly. "It's David, my assistant. Excuse me." As Emory stepped into the hallway to take the call, Zariah turned back to the mirror for one final check. The woman who looked back at her was still Zariah Lane, but perhaps a new version, one who had found her way back to herself by finding her way back to Emory. When Emory returned, his expression had changed, the warmth replaced by a tense alertness that immediately put Zariah on edge. "What is it?" she asked. "What's wrong?" "That was David. He just got a call from one of our sources at Reynolds Development Group." Emory's voice was tight with controlled anger. "They know about our plan, Zariah. They've known all along." "How?" Zariah felt a chill run down her spine. "We've been so careful." "The house," Emory said grimly. "It's bugged. Victor must have had it wired years ago to keep tabs on my mother. We've been telling them exactly what we're planning to do." Zariah's mind raced. "So what do we do now? Call it off?" Emory was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through their options. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a determined, almost predatory expression that transformed his face. "No," he said, "we go ahead, but we change the game." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with lights, wealth, and influence. New York's elite moved through the space in designer gowns and tuxedos, air-kissing acquaintances and engaging in the practiced dance of high society small talk. At $10,000 per plate, the Children's Hospital benefit was as much about being seen as it was about charity. Victor and Patricia Reynolds stood near one of the massive floral arrangements, champagne flutes in hand, looking every inch the power couple. Victor's silver hair and commanding presence drew respectful nods from passing guests, while Patricia's ice-blonde elegance turned heads. "They should be arriving any minute," Patricia murmured, checking her diamond watch. The red carpet coverage started at 8. Victor sipped his champagne, outwardly calm, though his eyes constantly scanned the entrance. "And our people are in position, all of them. The moment Cade makes his announcement, our legal team will file the counter-injunction, and the press has already been primed with our version of events." Patricia's smile was cold. By morning, Emory Cade will be painted as a desperate man trying to distract from his own ethical lapses by making false accusations. And the girl, a gold digger who used her position to seduce him and influence his business decisions. Patricia shrugged elegantly. The classic tale of a powerful man thinking with the wrong head. The public will eat it up. Victor nodded approvingly. And with Cade's reputation in tatters, the Willowbrook development will stall. The shareholders will demand action, and our offer to step in and salvage the project will seem like a godsend. Just as you planned, Patricia agreed, touching his arm possessively. 25 years in the making. The murmur of conversation. In the ballroom suddenly shifted, a ripple of awareness spreading from the entrance toward the back of the room. Victor and Patricia turned to see what had caught everyone's attention. Emory Cade stood in the entrance, commanding in his tuxedo, his presence drawing all eyes. But it was the woman beside him who caused the real stir. Zariah, radiant in midnight blue, her hand resting on Emory's arm with casual intimacy. "Well," Patricia said, a hint of admiration in her voice despite herself, "she cleans up nicely." Victor's expression hardened as he watched the couple begin to make their way through the crowd, stopping to greet people, accepting congratulations and curious questions with easy smiles. They looked comfortable together, confident, not at all like a couple about to be exposed and humiliated. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "They're too calm." "They don't know we're onto them," Patricia reminded him. "They still think they have the element of surprise." But Victor wasn't convinced. In his decades of business, he had developed an instinct for danger, for when a plan was about to go sideways. And right now, that instinct was screaming at him, across the room. Emory caught his eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement between adversaries. Then, to Victor's surprise, Emory began leading Zariah directly toward them, cutting through the crowd with purpose. "They're coming over," Patricia said, tensing beside him. "This wasn't part of the plan." "Adapt," Victor advised tersely. "Smile. Let them make the first move." As Emory and Zariah approached, Victor plastered on his most convincing smile. "Emory, my boy, glad you could make it tonight." "Victor," Emory's voice was cool but polite. "Patricia, I'd like you to meet Zariah Lane, though I believe you two already know each other." Patricia's smile never wavered. "Of course, Zariah was one of our concierges at Glass Towers, though I believe she's currently on administrative leave." "Yes," Zariah said, meeting Patricia's gaze steadily. "Due to some rather unfortunate photographs that appeared in the press. Quite a coincidence, don't you think?" The implied accusation hung in the air between them, but Patricia merely raised an eyebrow. "The press can be so intrusive, but then when one chooses to date someone in the public eye, a certain loss of privacy is to be expected." "Indeed," Emory agreed smoothly. "Which is why Zariah and I have decided to address the situation head-on tonight. No more hiding, no more secrets." Victor's instincts flared again. "Oh, and what exactly does that entail?" Before Emory could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A group of people was entering the ballroom, people who definitely weren't on the guest list. Zariah recognized her brother Marcus among them, along with several older residents of Willowbrook, and with them, to her shock, was Mrs. Winters from Glass Towers. "What is this?" Patricia demanded, her composure finally cracking. "What are these people doing here?" "These people," Emory said calmly, "are the heart and soul of Willowbrook, the community you've been trying to destroy. I thought it was time they met the man behind the shell companies and false offers." Victor's face darkened with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Cade, and bringing these people into a private event is completely inappropriate." "Is it?" Emory's voice hardened. "More inappropriate than bugging my mother's house? Than intercepting letters between children? Than using a woman's job to manipulate her and her family?" Victor's eyes widened slightly, the only indication that Emory's words had hit their mark. "Careful, boy. You're making accusations you can't back up." "Actually," came a new voice, "he can back up every word." David, Emory's assistant, had appeared beside them, holding a tablet. On the screen was a document with the seal of the New York State Attorney General's office. "What is this?" Victor demanded, though the slight tremor in his voice suggested he already knew. "A warrant," David said simply, "for your financial records, your communications, and all documents related to Reynolds Development Group's activities in Willowbrook. It seems the Attorney General is very interested in patterns of real estate fraud, harassment of homeowners, and bribery of city officials. Patricia's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. "This is absurd. You can't possibly have enough evidence." "Oh, but we do," Emory interrupted. "You see, Victor, you weren't the only one who knew how to bug a house. When my mother died, and I inherited the Connecticut property, I had it swept for surveillance devices, and I found them, every single one. But instead of removing them, I left them in place, and I added a few of my own." Understanding dawned on Victor's face, quickly followed by fury. "You've been playing us." "For years," Emory confirmed. "Feeding you just enough information to make you think you knew my plans, including my supposed interest in developing Willowbrook. But the project, the properties you've been buying," Patricia stammered. "Are real," Emory nodded. "But not for the purpose you think. I never intended to demolish Willowbrook. My plan was always revitalization, preserving the historic homes, improving infrastructure, creating community spaces, all while making sure the current residents could afford to stay." Zariah looked at him in surprise. This was news to her as well. "You never told me that part," Emory smiled at her. "I was going to, but then we discovered the surveillance, and I needed everyone, including you, to believe I was planning a traditional development. Otherwise, Victor might have gotten suspicious. So, all of this, the photos, the scandal, the confrontation tonight, it was all part of your plan?" Zariah asked, beginning to understand the full scope of what Emory had orchestrated. "Not initially," Emory admitted. "Finding you again, reconnecting with you, that was the one variable I couldn't have predicted, the one thing Victor actually got right. He knew that if we ever found each other again, it would change everything." He turned back to Victor, his expression hardening. "And it has, but not in the way you expected." Victor's eyes darted around the room, calculating, looking for an escape route. But the entrance to the ballroom was now blocked by several serious-looking men in suits, not hotel security, but federal agents. "This isn't over, Cade," Victor said, his voice low and threatening. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I do," Emory replied calmly. "I'm dealing with the man who helped my father abuse my mother, who helped him track us after we escaped, who intercepted letters between two children because it suited his business interests. I know exactly who you are, Victor, and now so does everyone else." As if on cue, the massive screens around the ballroom, meant to display images of the children benefiting from the night's charity, suddenly showed something else entirely. Documents, photographs, transcripts of conversations. Evidence of Victor Reynolds' decades of corrupt business practices, manipulation and fraud. The ballroom erupted in gasps and murmurs as New York's elite realized they were witnessing the downfall of one of their own. Photographers who had been covering the charity event now turned their cameras toward the unfolding drama, capturing the moment Victor Reynolds' carefully constructed facade began to crumble. "Ms. Reynolds," one of the federal agents approached, his expression solemn. "Mr. Reynolds, I need you both to come with me." Patricia looked at Zariah, naked hatred in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Both of you." "No," Zariah said quietly. "The only thing I regret is the 20 years we lost because of you and your husband. But we're taking them back now." As the agents escorted Victor and Patricia from the ballroom, the crowd parted to let them pass, the collective judgment of high society already turning against them. In the world of New York's elite, nothing was more unforgivable than being caught. Marcus made his way through the stunned crowd to Zariah's side. "So you did it," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "You actually did it." "We did it," Zariah corrected, including Emory in her smile. "All of us." Mrs. Winters approached, her aged face beaming with pride. "I knew you two would find each other." "Again," she said, patting both their hands. "Some connections are just too strong to break, no matter how hard people try." Emory looked at the elderly woman with surprise. "You knew, all along?" "Of course I knew," Mrs. Winters chuckled. "I watched you two grow up, climbing my cherry tree, making your little promises to each other. When Zariah showed up at Glass Towers, I thought it was fate, though I admit I didn't expect quite such a dramatic reunion." The buzz of conversation in the ballroom was growing louder as news of Victor Reynolds' arrest spread. Reporters were already gathering near the entrance, hoping for statements from Emory or other witnesses to the evening's unexpected turn of events. "We should probably address the press," Emory said, looking toward the growing media presence. "Get our version of events out there before the rumors start flying." "What exactly is our version?" Zariah asked, suddenly aware that they were standing in the middle of a very public scandal, with all of New York society watching. Emory took her hand, his expression softening as he looked at her. "The truth," he said simply, "that we were childhood friends separated by circumstances beyond our control, that we found each other again by chance, and in the process uncovered a conspiracy that had affected not just us, but an entire community." "And what about us?" Zariah asked quietly. "What do we tell them about that?" Emory's smile was warm, private, meant only for her despite the hundreds of eyes watching them. "We tell them that some connections never break, that sometimes, against all odds, people find their way back to each other." He squeezed her hand gently. "If that's what you want." Zariah looked around the ballroom, at the wealth and privilege that had always seemed so far removed from her life in Willowbrook, at the reporters and photographers eager to capture their story and sell it to the highest bidder, at the curious faces of New York's elite, already wondering how a simple concierge had captured the heart of one of the city's most eligible bachelors. This would be her life if she chose Emory. Cameras, scrutiny, whispers, judgment. A world so different from anything she had known before. But then she looked at Emory himself, at the man who had once been the boy who shared his wishing stone with her, who had written her letters filled with childhood hopes and dreams, who had carried her memory through all the years of silence and separation, and she knew her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "That's exactly what I want." 6 months later, the cherry tree in Mrs. Winter's old yard was in full bloom, its pink blossoms creating a canopy of color against the clear blue sky. Beneath it stood a small gathering of people, family, friends, neighbors from Willowbrook, all dressed in their Sunday best and beaming with joy. Zariah stood at the edge of the garden, watching as Lily and Grace, dressed in matching pale blue dresses, practiced walking down the makeshift aisle between the white folding chairs. They took their role as flower girls very seriously, carefully dropping rose petals from their little baskets as they had been shown. "They're naturals," Marcus said, coming to stand beside his sister. "Though I'm pretty sure all those petals will be gone before the actual ceremony at this rate." Zariah laughed, her heart light with happiness. "We have plenty more. And anyway, it's not about perfection." "No," Marcus agreed, his expression softening as he looked at her. "It's about family, about coming full circle." And it was, in so many ways. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of change, of healing, of building something new from the fragments of the past. Victor and Patricia Reynolds were awaiting trial on multiple charges of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy. Their assets had been frozen, their companies placed under investigation. The scandal had rocked New York's real estate world, exposing a network of corruption that had operated unchecked for decades. Glass Towers had new management now, a team selected by Emory for their integrity and vision. Zariah had been offered her job back, with a promotion and an apology, but she had declined. Her path had changed, leading her in a new direction entirely. The Willowbrook Revitalization Project was underway, guided by a community board that included Marcus and other longtime residents. The historic homes were being preserved and restored, infrastructure improved, green spaces expanded, and at the center of it all, the old Lane family home stood proudly, its blue paint fresh, its white shutters gleaming in the sun. "It's time," Marcus said, checking his watch. "Ready?" Zariah nodded, taking a deep breath. "More than ready." She followed her brother to the back porch of their childhood home, where a small crowd had gathered. As she stepped through the door, a hush fell over the assembled guests, all eyes turning to her. Zariah wore a simple white dress that fell to her ankles, a crown of cherry blossoms in her hair. No designer gown, no diamonds, just a woman in love, returning to her roots. Marcus offered his arm, and together they walked down the steps and into the garden, following the path of rose petals laid by Lily and Grace. At the end of the aisle, beneath the cherry tree, stood Emory, handsome in a light grey suit, his face lighting up as he saw her approaching. Beside him was a small table holding two objects, a smooth stone with a hole through the middle and a faded piece of paper that Zariah recognized as their childhood marriage certificate, created under a blanket fort so many years ago. As Zariah reached him, Emory took her hands in his eyes never leaving hers. 25 years ago we made a promise under a blanket fort, he said, his voice carrying to the small gathering of loved ones. To always be there for each other, to never forget each other, to find our way back to each other no matter what. It took us a while, Zariah said, smiling through the tears that blurred her vision. But we made it. The minister stepped forward then, beginning the ceremony that would officially join their lives together. But in truth, Zariah and Emory had been joined long before, by a childhood bond that had withstood separation, by letters never received but deeply felt, by a connection that had refused to be broken despite all the forces aligned against it. They exchanged vows beneath the cherry tree, surrounded by family and friends and the ghosts of their younger selves. Zariah felt a sense of completion, of coming home to a place she had never really left. And when Emory slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band holding the wishing stone now set in silver, she knew that some wishes, no matter how long deferred, were always meant to come true. The reception was held in the backyard of the Lane family home, with tables set up on the lawn and fairy lights strung between the trees. There was laughter and music, stories shared and memories revisited. Mrs. Winters danced with Lily and Grace, showing them steps from her youth despite her 90 years. Marcus gave a toast that left not a dry eye in the gathering. As evening fell, Zariah and Emory slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand to the old tree house that still stood in the massive oak at the edge of the property. It had been rebuilt and reinforced, a project Emory and Marcus had worked on together in the months leading up to the wedding. They climbed the ladder carefully, mindful of their formal clothes, and sat side by side in the small wooden structure, looking out over Willowbrook as the lights began to come on in the houses below. "Happy?" Emory asked, his arm around her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible," Zariah replied, leaning into him. "Though I still can't believe we're starting our married life in my childhood bedroom." Emory laughed. "Only until the renovations on the penthouse are done, and then we'll split our time, weekdays in the city, weekends here. The best of both worlds," Zariah agreed. She had come to appreciate certain aspects of life in Manhattan, the culture, the energy, the opportunities. But Willowbrook would always be home, the place where their story had begun and where it had found its way back to itself. "I have something for you," Emory said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. "I found it in a box of my mother's things, hidden away where even Victor's surveillance couldn't find it." Zariah took the envelope, her heart skipping a beat as she recognized her own childish handwriting on the front. "One of my letters." "The last one?" "I think," Emory nodded. "She must have intercepted it before Victor could, kept it safe all these years." With trembling fingers, Zariah opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, the words written in purple marker, the eyes dotted with little hearts. "Dear Emmy, today is your birthday. You're 9 years old now. I made you a card, but I don't know where to send it. Dad says you're not coming back, but I don't believe him. You promised we would always be friends, and you never break your promises. I miss you so much. Nobody else understands me like you do. Nobody else knows about our secret place in the treehouse or our plans to get married when we grow up. I'm keeping the stone safe for you, the wishing stone from the creek. I make a wish on it every night that you'll come back. Mom says wishes don't come true, but I don't believe her either. Please write back if you get this letter. Please tell me where you are. I feel like a part of me is missing without you. Your best friend forever and ever, Zariah P.S. I still want to marry you when we grow up. I haven't changed my mind." Tears slipped down Zariah's cheeks as she finished reading. "All these years," she whispered, "all the pain and confusion and feeling abandoned. And we were both just children, caught in someone else's war." Emory held Her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "We can't get those years back, Zariah, but we have now, we have the future, and I intend to make the most of every single day of it with you." From below they could hear the sounds of their wedding reception continuing, music and laughter, the voices of friends and family celebrating their union. The past had been reclaimed, the broken pieces mended, the long separation ended at last. Zariah looked out over Willowbrook, the neighborhood that had shaped them both, that had witnessed their childhood bond and would now witness their new beginning. In the distance, she could see glass towers rising above the Manhattan skyline, a glittering monument to the world Emory had built in the years they were apart. Two worlds, once separated by circumstances and secrets, now joined together, just as they themselves were joined, the circle complete, the promise fulfilled. "We should go back," Zariah said eventually. "They'll be wondering where we've disappeared to." "Let them wonder," Emory smiled, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "We've waited 25 years for this moment. I think we've earned a few minutes alone." As they sat together in the treehouse of their childhood, now husband and wife, Zariah felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for most of her life. The wishing stone had worked after all, not through magic, but through the enduring power of a connection that had refused to be broken. Some bonds, she now understood, were simply meant to last. Some hearts, no matter how far apart, would always find their way back to each other. And some stories, even after the most difficult middle chapters, were destined for a happy ending. In the cherry tree beside the treehouse, a night bird began to sing, its melody carrying across the quiet neighborhood. Below, Marcus's voice called their names, letting them know it was time for the first dance. Hand in hand, Zariah and Emory climbed down from the treehouse and returned to the celebration, to the life they had finally claimed together, to the future that awaited them, to the love that had survived against all odds. And in the glow of fairy lights beneath a sky full of stars, they danced, not as the billionaire and the concierge, not as the lost boy and the left-behind girl, but simply as Emory and Zariah, whose hearts had finally found their way home. The end.